Hey friends, this is Joseph Maynor. So what I want to do in this video is I want to do an even more comprehensive video as to my higher spiral model, which is truth, love, and beauty. And then even beyond beauty, there's a stage called opal, which I haven't even begun to fill out yet. So basically, I'm going to cover yellow, turquoise, coral, teal, mauve, emerald, dusty rose. And I think it's important for me to say in the first instance that this is not spiral dynamics. This is my own extension model to the spiral dynamics model. So I think it's important to keep those things separate. This is a totally different model, but it builds upon my interpretation of the spiral dynamics model, specifically and most importantly, stage turquoise. So before we can really understand turquoise, we need to go back to yellow. And if you remember from studying spiral dynamics, if you don't remember because you're not a spiral dynamics person, then I'm going to fill you in right now. So yellow is the first of the tier 2 stages on the spiral. And tier 2 is very different from tier 1. So in a way, what I've done is expanded tier 2. So these, I call these my extended spiral stages, which are basically going to be everything after turquoise. But let's go back to yellow because this is really where tier 2 starts. So yellow is a masculine stage, and the essence of yellow is truth as systemic integration. Yellow sees how all perspectives, systems, and stages fit together. Yellow is the first truly meta-systemic view, maps of maps, frameworks of frameworks. Yellow is about, I can see the whole picture and move between paradigms. Now, the shadow of stage yellow is hyper-rationality. Life gets reduced to models and abstractions. Risk of arrogance. I see the whole, others don't. Yellow can become cold, detached, stuck in intellectual scaffolding, right? We've all seen this with like college professors, maybe. I mean, there are certain people that are in yellow. Now, the correction by turquoise to yellow is turquoise dissolves the over-mental frame into lived unity. Where yellow builds meta maps, turquoise says the whole is not a concept. It's an ecology you live inside. The whole with a capital W. It's not a concept. It's an ecology you live inside, or a network of relations. And so the archetypes for stage yellow are going to be integral theory or Ken Wilber, systems thinkers, cybernetics. The metaphor for stage yellow is the architect, builder of vast blueprints. Now, the next stage, which is stage turquoise, is the first stage where I put my own somewhat of a spin on a legitimate spiral dynamic stage, which is stage turquoise. I pretty much agree with everything that Beck and Cohen, who wrote the book Spiral Dynamics, talk about when they talk about turquoise, but I have some of my own ideas about it too. So I just want to make clear that when I'm talking about turquoise, I'm not stating turquoise as it's religiously stated, in the book Spiral Dynamics. So, but it's pretty close. So just to go back to the theory here a little bit, we have turquoise, coral, teal, mauve, emerald, and dusty rose. So if you've been following my last few videos, you'll see that turquoise and coral I call the higher truth stages. Teal and mauve I call the higher love stages. And emerald and dusty rose I call the higher beauty stages. Now this isn't human truth anymore. This isn't human love anymore. This isn't human beauty anymore. This is very much getting outside of, but also integrating back in the human. If that makes sense. If not, you'll listen to this and you'll see how it's an integration between the human and the mystical and a transcendence, but then also a reintegration. It involves some themes from spiritual enlightenment. I think probably most people who are spiritually enlightened fall into at least turquoise. Turquoise coral is pretty common. Teal is common. Mauve is common. Emerald is much less common. Dusty rose is much less common. So because there's no theory to point anybody to these stages, right? So one of the cool videos that I remember watching when I was watching Leo Gura's old videos is he had this video on the difference between theory and practice. And I'll never forget, he said in that video, I really love theory. He said, I really love theory. Almost nothing excites me more than good theory. And the reason being is that how can you plan, how can you grow, and how can you put anything into practice if you don't have theory? So without theory, you're only going to grow as far as the previous theory that you've integrated that caused the change in your development. So basically this is a map that I created, just on my own journey. And so turquoise, feminine truth. The essence of turquoise is truth as relational unity. Everything is interconnected. God/nature, ecology, the living whole with a capital W. Knowing truth for turquoise is aligning perception with reality's infinite web. So imagine a network of nodes all interconnected, and that network being the true being, and each of the nodes being recontextualized as being part of a whole, a much larger whole. And Spinoza is a good example of turquoise, to see things sub specie eternitatis, or under the aspect of eternity. And people who are integrating turquoise, oftentimes, this is where you're gonna, probably be doing some psychedelics. You're gonna be seeing ego being put into high relief. Because what you're doing is you're getting up underneath the human. You're starting to realize that the human is a metaphysical lens. See, even at yellow, you still kind of buy into the idea that you're a human. Or even if you don't, it's a purely kind of a conceptual consideration. Turquoise, it ain't conceptual anymore. It's like you've had some kind of mystical experience now where you've had some kind of ego collapse, and you've had a transformation of being the whole. So now the shadow, of turquoise is overexpansion into abstraction. Everything is one, right? The web of relations becomes diffuse, overwhelming, or paralyzing. There is no self. This is where people get real critical of the ego at stage turquoise. The ego is seen to be less important than the whole. So there's no separate self, meaning that it's the links that are important, not the nodes. And it's really the whole exists primarily, and the parts think they exist as little entities, but in reality they're just components of a much larger whole. And so some more aspects of turquoise's shadow is risk of passivity. If all is one, why act? So yellow's maps sneak back in, treating truth as conceptual scaffolding rather than lived unity. And this is a metaphysical stage. See, that's why it's a truth stage. It's a metaphysical stage. What you're seeing is that you're recognizing that the human is metaphysics. And what you're doing is you're augmenting the divine on top of the human, and you're recontextualizing the human in terms of the divine, but from a feminine point of view, from a link instead of a node point of view. So what is the correction by coral, which is the next stage to turquoise? Well, coral strips away the web itself, pointing back to the witness as pure truth. So coral, it's a truth stage, but it's a masculine stage. It goes back from the link to the node, or from the relation to the individual. So the witness with a capital W is pure truth at coral. Where turquoise says all is relation, coral says relations are illusion. Only pure consciousness is real. Consciousness with a capital C. So what are some archetypes of stage turquoise? Well, Spinoza, Taoist mystics. What's a metaphor for stage turquoise? The cosmic web. Each node glows because it's connected to the whole. So let's move on now to coral, which is the higher truth stage, but in the masculine direction. So what's the essence of coral? Truth as radical transcendence, pure consciousness, the I am with the capital A, capital A-M, I am. Shankara's Advaita Vedanta, right? Brahman alone is real. The world is Maya. The masculine sword cuts through relations to reveal the indestructible witness. And the witness is truth, right? Unchanging truth. Or consciousness. Or the self with a capital S. So what's the shadow of coral? And I'm laughing a little bit because we all know people who are at coral, right? I mean, this is, if you're involved in any kind of spiritual community, you're going to know people who are at turquoise and people who are at coral. So what's the shadow of coral, though? Ego denial. The ego doesn't exist becomes a bypass. It can fall into authoritarian sage roles, where the teacher speaks absolute truth and the disciples surrender. Relational warmth is stripped away. So what is the correction of coral by Teal, or the next feminine stage? Well, Teal insists that ego is real from a practical perspective and must be integrated before it can be transcended. And so at Teal, love becomes the balancing force. Coral's sword is tempered by Teal's embrace. What are the archetypes of Coral? Shankara, Ramana Maharshi, Neo-Advaita somewhat, and not always though. Sometimes Neo-Advaita can be more I don't know. Neo-Advaita is just weird, but definitely Shankara, Ramana Maharshi, Advaita Vedanta. So the metaphor for Coral would be the flame burning away illusion until only light remains. So what's the stage after Coral? Teal. Very few people at this stage. I've probably met I could count on one hand the people that I've ever met who have been at Teal in my whole experience in spirituality, both online and offline. So Teal is the first higher love stage. It's a feminine stage, comes after Coral. So what's the essence of Teal? Love as wholeness and integration. So Carl Jung, individuation, shadow work, reconciling inner opposites. To love is to hold the whole self and the whole of others without fragmentation. Ego is no longer the enemy. It's embraced and healed. It's hot here. So ego is no longer the enemy at Teal. This is how you can tell somebody's at Teal instead of Coral, because at Coral there's no ego, right? They don't even acknowledge that they. You try to talk about shadow work to somebody at Coral, and it's not going to work. They're not going to bite. However, at Teal, ego is no longer the enemy. It's embraced and healed. Now, the shadow of Teal is endless inner work, shadow chasing. It can become heavy, psychological, therapeutic. And the risk of Teal is never being satisfied, always integrating without arriving at ease. So what's the correction of Teal by Mauve, which is going to be the next stage, masculine stage? So Mauve says, stop trying to heal everything. Just drop the brush, sit, breathe. Mauve says, love as surrender, not effort. So what are the archetypes of Teal? Definitely Carl Jung, depth psychologist, Rumi as a poet of wholeness. So what's the metaphor for Teal? The circle, all parts gathered, reconciled, seen. So this is the first higher love stage, stage Teal. Notice how we're beyond truth. Now, in spiral dynamics, you don't lose anything that's already below you on the spiral. So you don't lose truth. You don't lose higher truth when you move into higher love. In fact, higher truth is a prerequisite to be able to attain higher love. And then higher truth and higher love are a prerequisite to be able to attain higher beauty. That's a better way to think about it. So it's not like you go from truth to love to beauty. No, it's like you integrate truth, and then on top of that, you integrate love. And now you have this truth and love. And then on top of truth and love, you integrate beauty. And so now you have truth, love, and beauty in a network of relations. You can always draw from below on the spiral. Okay, friends, I'm going to take a break and cool off for a minute. It's a little hot in here. And we'll come back and we will talk about mauve, emerald, and dusty rose. Just give me 1 second. All right, friends, welcome back. So let's move into mauve. So mauve is a masculine stage. It's higher love. The essence of mauve is love as surrender to mystery. So Zen, not even. Apophatic mysticism. Silence. Apophatic mysticism. Silence. Cutting away even the subtle effort to hold the whole. Presence itself is compassion. Presence itself is compassion. We've met people like this, haven't we? Some famous spiritually enlightened masters. You probably know some. I'm thinking, maybe Adyashanti. Now, the shadow of mauve is that it can drift into quietism, detachment, or nihilism. Like it's all an illusion, so why bother? Risk of anti-conceptual authoritarianism. Thought is the enemy. Right? There's a lot of people actually online, spiritual enlightenment teachers. They really, as they're, have a foot in mauve, they really do develop a kind of anti-conceptual authoritarianism where thought becomes the enemy. So what's the correction by the next stage to mauve? Well, emerald picks the brush back up, but now is play. Mauve empties the canvas, emerald paints again with joy. So what are the archetypes of mauve? Well, Zen masters, Nagarjuna. What's the metaphor of mauve? The empty bowl, right? Holding everything by holding nothing. So this is the masculine higher love stage. Now we're going to move into beauty. So the first beauty stage is going to be emerald, which follows mauve. And it's the feminine beauty stage. So what's the essence of emerald? Well, now you got to remember, it's like we've already integrated the feminine and masculine higher truth, the feminine and masculine higher love. Now we're moving into feminine higher beauty. And the next stage will be masculine higher beauty. So what's the essence of emerald? Beauty as the central axis. Higher truth and higher love are not abandoned, but woven into aesthetic play. Derrida, language as différence, infinite play. Nietzsche, philosophy as art, style, mask, dance. Models, theories, and philosophies are provisional artworks, not absolutes. This is key, right here. And you know what? There are a few people that I've met who I would say are probably an emerald. But this one right here is so characteristic. Models, theories and philosophies are provisional artworks, not absolutes. So you're fully integrating higher beauty and creativity and being a creator at this stage. Now, what's the shadow of emerald? Emerald can collapse into wordplay without depth. Derrida misunderstood as nihilism. Risk of decadence, endless relational beauty without stakes. Tends to underplay power, believing beauty itself will carry the day. So what's the correction of emerald by the next stage, Dusty Rose? Dusty Rose reintroduces the sword. Precise disruption. Pruning. Elegance fused with power. Beauty matures into a force that can reshape structures, not just decorate them. So what are some archetypes of stage emerald? Nietzsche, Derrida, Roland Barthes, certain artists like Brian Eno. So what's the metaphor for stage emerald? The dance, beauty in motion, weaving truth and love. So the next stage is the masculine aspect of higher beauty, which I titled Dusty Rose. So what's the essence of Dusty Rose? And this is the one that I'm integrating right now, actually. So beauty fused with power and precision. Where emerald plays, Dusty Rose cuts. Power is now aesthetic. The single cut, the minimal note, the disruption that reshapes the field. Foucault's power knowledge, the invisible scaffolding of discourse. Foucault's power knowledge, the invisible scaffolding of discourse. Or Miles Davis, don't play all the notes, play the right one. Now, what's the shadow of Dusty Rose? Well, it risks aloofness, detachment under the guise of purity. And it can prune too harshly or value restraint to the point of sterility. And so the next stage that it will be corrected by, which I'm not going to basically say anything about in this video, is stage opal, which is going to be the next stage after Dusty Rose. So I've just postulated the name. I've just named it. I haven't filled it out yet. So what are some archetypes for Dusty Rose? Foucault, Miles Davis. What's the metaphor for Dusty Rose? The gardener shears at dusk, pruning beauty to open the view. So what are the corrections, just to summarize? What are the corrections in sequence? So yellow's abstraction is corrected by turquoise's lived unity. Turquoise's diffusion is corrected by coral's transcendence of relation. Coral's bypass is corrected by teal's individuation and wholeness. Teal's heaviness is corrected by mauve's silence and surrender. Mauve's passivity is corrected by emerald's aesthetic play. Emerald's prettiness is corrected by Dusty Rose's incisive beauty as power. Okay, friends, hopefully this was a good video. And I think in this video I've probably outlined better than I have before the higher spiral, truth, love, and beauty as I've postulated it. Okay, friends, I'll talk to you soon. Take care.